you explain that to us? What is the triangle of teaching? Why is it
Sure.
important?
Well, why don't I put it on screen here for a second, so everybody can see it. Three characteristics of a good teacher, the triangle of teaching, we call it, which looks fantastic on screen, because it is a nice equilateral triangle. It includes being organizational, it includes being relational, and it includes being knowledgeable. And in a perfect world, we would have an equilateral triangle. That is our life of these things. But the reality of it, and why we spend a lot of time on this in PD, is because nobody's an equilateral triangle. Nobody has each of these things perfectly. And in fact, I would go so far as to say we would not want a team at our school where everybody was this perfect thing. We want the balancing act that has to happen among people. Some are incredibly organizational and incredibly relational, and they don't like to say it as teachers, but their knowledge level might actually be the lowest level for them. They don't feel like they really know their topic well, especially when you bring new teachers in and they're learning new courses, right? But we embrace that. We think that's fantastic. We have other teachers whose knowledge is fantastic. They're organizational, but they struggle on the relationship side. And we're good with that. We like that. We embrace that. We bring everybody in together so that we can, together form a good community and learn from each other. And I think that's, probably one of the biggest keys, is that we learn from each other in that situation. We learn how to adapt the other things. It's not like I say, I'm not organizational, so I'm never going to be. Stop expecting it. My report cards will never be done on time. Don't expect that from me, right? We don't say that. We need you to grow. We need you to learn, but we don't look for perfect people. We look for exceptional people who will struggle with certain areas.
Not being knowledgeable enough in your content is a weakness as a teacher. Not being organizational, and God knows that was my weakness when I was a teacher. You know what I mean? All the paperwork was not my friend. But I mean, I see it as a weakness in my performance. So why would we embrace a weakness? One of these three.
Sure. Let me flip it around on you. I think you're starting from that question is starting from a false beginning, perhaps, which is to say that a weakness is bad. And I think that's where we look at it. Nobody can be exceptional in all areas. When you embrace that we are not this perfect triangle of teachers, we allow for our exceptionalities to fly, and as a team we support the things that maybe you're less good at. I think there's often a real falseness that comes along with the image that you've got it all together. There's we say this with our students all the time, because we're trying right now, as kids come out of COVID. We kind of talked about that a little bit before, but as kids come out of COVID, they're uncertain. They're not good at things that they were probably good at before COVID, because they haven't practiced it properly. So in our classrooms, we are forever saying, tell the kids when you make a mistake, tell them I did that wrong.
Right.
I have students that they struggle to get their stuff in on time. And I can look at them and say, I struggle with deadlines too. But there are some deadlines you can't go beyond, so we got to sort this out. We got to get it fixed, because, you leave. I've got my grade 12s leaving in a couple of months. And I've been hounding them these last few months that the grace you're getting in high school is not there in university. You've got to figure this out, even if it's not what you're great at. You got to figure out a way to do it. And sometimes that just means working with other people, right, to make it happen. So
how is it okay for a teacher to go into the classroom not as knowledgeable as we would like them to be?
So I think you have to look at that from a couple of perspectives. Let's go with the knowledgeable side of it, right? One thing a teacher has to be able to do, and you see this in any classroom setting, you start teaching and you just realize your lesson's not going where it needs to go. They're not with you. And to quote Friends, you suddenly have to pivot, and you've got to try and go in a different direction, right? Part of being a teacher is that ability. I think when it comes to knowledge, sometimes, especially when you're a new teacher at a new school and they look at you, and I don't care whether you're a private school, a public school, because I've got lots of friends in the public system, and they're like, I remember the time I was just told you're teaching this course starting in September, and I don't know anything about that course. You have to, part of being a teacher, and I think it's part of what keeps people in teaching and pushes people out of teaching, is this ability to be able to accept that sometimes I just need to stay, 2 weeks or 3 weeks ahead of my students. I've got to know more than them right now, and a belief in yourself that I can know more than them. And when I get through teaching this the first time, it'll be a breeze after that. I've got it after that. I've been thinking about this because I knew you would hit on the knowledgeable one, because it's an important one, right? I think educators also struggle with believing what they know, if I can word it that way. And I might take my words back in a minute. But I think because we teach, we realize what we don't know. We realize there's just so much more than what we know in that instance, right?
Of course.
And so I think educators struggle with that some. They struggle with this idea that they've got to know it all the time. And I think educators need to give themselves a bit of a break and say, you know what, it's okay if I need to spend some extra time prepping for this lesson, because I just don't remember that like I should. And I need to just spend some time building my knowledge back up to the point that when I'm in front of my students, I know what I'm talking about and I'm good at it. It goes back to what I said there about, my favorite teacher. I actually had three. I had three that were just so passionate about their topic. They just loved. I had a law teacher, I had a theology teacher, and I had a history teacher, and they were all just so passionate about their topic. And I think that carries through a lot, and that gets you a lot further than knowledge. I had some really bad teachers and professors. We've all had them, right? They knew their stuff, but knowledge isn't enough. It has to be there. You're the teacher, but it isn't enough, right? And
Right.
I think that's where this triangle comes in, because we value, okay, we hired you. We believe you can teach, right? We believe you know what you're going to talk about, but we value relationship above all the others at St. Jude's. If it's your weakest, we're okay with that, as long as we see nuggets of it, that you'll get there, that you will, because high school students learn from people they think care about them, that they believe care about them,
Right.
and when they believe that, they give an immense amount of grace. Just last week, I taught probably the worst class I've taught since I came to St. Jude's. Even when I walked out, I thought, what the heck was that? What just happened there, right? But not a student complained. I mean, maybe themselves, but nobody said anything. There was no rolling of eyes. There was none of that. Because we have a relationship, and the next day I went back in and said, okay, that might not have been the best class we've ever had together. Let's move on. Let's keep going. Let's keep learning. Right. So it's all a balancing act. And I think it's a willingness to acknowledge and accept it. Really, that pushes teachers further than they would go otherwise.
Yeah, I remember some days I go into the classroom, I have no idea what I'm talking about for some reason, right? I'm not prepared, or it was one of those lessons that I'm just not sort of convinced of, and the kids are like, man, okay, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
You'll do better tomorrow, no worries.
Well, and of course, now we get to use the other option of, that is a fantastic question, Johnny. Why don't we all get our laptops out and Google that and see what the answer to that question
That's
is,
right.
right?
That's right.
But yes, it can be tough, especially a day later, the answer, right?
Of course,
It
right.
was just in the moment, you're like, where did that question come from? That wasn't in my lesson plan, right?
Right.
So.
You said something. You said you value relationship building overall. Why?
Because we believe everything else will fall into place if the relationship is there. There are some fantastic people out there that we would never hire as teachers because we don't think they could do the rest of it, right? But I am blown away, year after year. One teacher that comes to mind, they know their stuff. They can teach their lessons. they're terrible at organization, but they're probably one of the favorite teachers in the upper school. There's actually
Mhm.
two of them that fall into that category where I'm just like, every year the kids just call them out and call them out. They're just such a fan, because our head of school, sorry, our founder, he puts it to us often. Think of the teachers that you remember,
Mhm.
and now think of what exactly did they teach you? What knowledge exactly did they? You can't do it,
Right,
right?
right.
You can't do it. And so what you remember though is that relationship or that passion or that just belief that if we just communicate this clearly enough, it will change your life and the world, right? So,
Yeah.
relationship is so vital.
What is your biggest frustration as a teacher, as an educator?
The frustration I see is kids just not becoming what you know they could be, if they
Hmm.
would
Oh,
apply
wow.
themselves. It's
Hmm.
seeing what they're capable of, uh,
Yes.
and seeing them just fall short from laziness, from uh, whatever the reason is, seeing them not become what they could be. And the reason I say I'm starting to see is because I'm also starting to, I'm my first year of seeing the spectrum from 9, 10, 11, 12, and some of these kids that really in grade 9 and 10, you're like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? Right. And
Yeah.
by grade 12, they've worked through some of those things. They're on their way to becoming really good adults. And I think the frustration is in dealing with that, but the antidote probably is remembering we've seen it before. We'll see it again, but
Right.
the
Right.
kids do get through it. And this whole idea of just not giving up on a kid just because they're just a pain, and that's all they are right now. But
Hmm.
that's not all they will be, right? And we need to get them through those times, and learn to see the good of it.
Mhm.
Today, we had a conversation about a student at the school, and a concerning student who is causing more trouble than we like to see. And the conversation was wrapping up, and the owner was there, and we were all chatting, and the head of school, the owner, and myself were having a meeting, and we're talking about this kid, and in the end, though, he said something. So is this guy usually the one starting the problem? And we're like, yeah, usually he is. And he just smiled. I said, okay, good. And we knew as soon as we saw this grin on his face, it was, this kid is going to do something. All we have to do
Hmm.
is figure out how to direct them in the right way,
He
and not
saw
give up on them
the
now. So
yeah,
yeah,
he saw
it's
the leadership in the kid, right? Even though it's I mean, it is being used in a negative way, but it's there.
Yes, and it goes back to, not that we didn't plan this, but this is going to segue nicely. It goes all the way back to the beginning of, why do we not care about having an equilateral triangle? It's because
Hmm.
for every strength there is a weakness. Somebody who is exceptionally relational is probably going to struggle organizationally. It's
Right.
probably going to be because they care more about you than they do the paperwork,
My
right? And
mind is
so,
blown right now. That
right,
makes so
so
much sense. Yes.
yes, but this is the thing with the kids too, is it their strengths are at this point going to be their weaknesses often, because
Yes.
even the exceptionally smart kids, their brilliance is their weakness right now, because they don't know how to do anything but that. In the
Right.
case of this kid we were talking about, his his leadership skills, his ability to drive things,
Hmm.
just needs to be harnessed, but right now it's his greatest weakness at the same time. Right,
Wow.
so
Hmm.
we're good with that. It also is one of those, yeah, you bang your head against the wall a lot
It
as
needs
you try to get
polishing.
them to
Yeah.
see.
It
Yeah,
needs polishing a little bit,
yeah,
but he'll get there. Wow, that's
yeah.
fascinating. Have you figured out how to motivate students who are just not interested?
So what I would say to that, which I am quite certain there are lots of people who have studied this a long time who can give better answers than me, but I'll give you the one that I use, and I use
Yes.
it because when I came over, my buddy said, look, this is what you do if the class just isn't engaging,
Hmm.
whether it's one student or the whole class, because sometimes it's the greater majority anyway.
Right.
uh Stop teaching and tell them a story.
Hmm.
Tell them a story about your life. Tell them something that they will engage with, because knowledge is so vital, it's so important, right?
Hmm.
But it's just knowledge, it's just stuff, it's just numbers, it's just formulas, it's just all that. sometimes they're just not engaging because they just don't see any purpose to any of it, right?
Yes, right.
And as you learn to, go in windy paths rather than straight lines down your lesson, hopefully you find a way to draw it back in. If it's, if you're 10 minutes into an 80-minute class, you can't just tell a story for the next 70 minutes. You got to get back to teaching at some point. But I remember I did it last year with a bunch of my students. They were just not, they were DP students. And because of the way the exams worked and the way our schedule works in Ontario, they had to come back after their DP exams and do another unit because there was still more time in the school calendar, right? But they were checked out. They just didn't. And the first class they came back, and I thought, okay, yeah, this is not going well. And I was doing, it's my favorite unit. It's a unit on the you want to be. And it's because I finally, after I get rid of all the DP stuff, I finally get to do something I like. So I get to, and so it's a leadership course, but it's a leadership from how do you recognize who you are to become who you want to be. And it just wasn't happening. So I'm like, all right, everybody's, put your phones away, close your laptops, put the textbooks away. I just want to tell you a story about when I was in college and I had to, and we just went on with it. And as soon as you say, okay, everybody stop, I just want to tell you a story. They get it.
Right.
They're back because you're finally going to tell them something they care about. Right. So, I that to me, it's just it's a thing. It's what I use. Other people might have better ones, but just stopping, and because it's about relationship and they can connect with a story about you. So yeah.
That's awesome.